Ljudi se okupljaju i udružuju iz raznih razloga. Sport, numizmatika, stripovi, rock'n'roll band, skupljanje leptira, religija, grupni seks. Možete li povjerovati da se neki ljudi udružuju da bi vladali svijetom? Takav je navodno slučaj sa veselom družbom Bilderberg. Ime su dobili po nizozemskom hotelu u kojem su se prvi put sastali 1954. godine. Članovi kraljevskih obitelji, političari, utjecajni poslovni ljudi, članovi obavještajnih zajednica skupili su se da bi se dogovorili oko dugoročnih strateških interesa između SAD-a i Zapadne Europe. Tako je počela tradicija održavanja godišnjih konferencija. Svake godine skupina se sastaje u nekom drugom gradu, a uporni novinar Daniel Estulin posljednjih 15 godina proveo razotkrivajući tajne sastanke skupine Bilderberg. Estulinova knjiga Istinita priča o družbi Bilderberg postala je međunarodna uspješnica. U Španjolskoj je doživjela 13 izdanja, a objavljena je u 53 zemlje. Estulinovim riječima, bez obzira gdje se skupina Bilderberg odluči sastati, uvijek ću saznati o čemu će razgovarati, možete se kladiti u to. Pa kladimo se, mada nam to nije običaj ovdje, na rubu znanosti. Pozdrav svima. Daniel Estulin je istraživački novinar i autor knjige Istinita priča o družbi Bilderberg. Pa čujmo što je u Bilderbergzima iznjedrio u 15 godina istraživanja. Dobar dan.
Good evening. Thank you. First of all, thank you very much. It's an honor for me to do your program.
Jeste li istraživački novinar ili ste nešto više s obzirom na zaleđe koje nam može omogućiti da vidimo na koji način istražujete Bilderberge?
Well, in fact, I'm not an investigative journalist. Investigative journalists are journalists. They go to school, they study their art, and then they apply it. My background is in military counterintelligence.
Gdje ste radili i u kojoj službi i kada?
I've worked for 12 years with the Russian counterintelligence, and I left it about 5 years ago to join this other organization called Meta Groups. It's a group of people in and out of intelligence and counterintelligence services who are actually working together across the world to stop the Bilderbergers and their cohorts from actually exercising their plans.
Uprkos tome što su Bilderberzi našli svoj put i do novina i do knjiga, mnogi ljudi još uvijek se prvi put sreću s tim pojmom. Objasnite nam tko ili što je skupina Bilderberg, zašto se zove Bilderberg, od kada postoji pod tim imenom.
Well, you know, in the world of international finance, there are those who steer the events and those who react to the events. And while the latter, they're better known, they're greater in numbers, the true power rests with the former. These are the people you never see in the media. And the very center of this a giant global conspiracy sits a group called themselves the Bilderberger Society Organizations or Club. What they are is an aristocracy of purpose between North American and European elites on the best ways to rule the planet.
Da li su Bilderberzi tek jedna od grupa koje umreženi kontroliraju svijetom ili su možda oni glavna grupa?
Well, actually, they're not the main. They're a very important medium, and they are a medium because through them, a lot of organizations, especially financial and industry interests, meet to exercise their ideology. And that ideology is not one world government or new world order. So many people, unfortunately, especially in conspiracy circles, talk about the ideology of what these people represent is rather one world company limited, where literally one day corporations shall give orders to governments.
Koje biste još grupe spomenuli uz Bilderberge kao važne u toj agendi?
You can mention, obviously, aside from the Bilderbergers, which are more exclusive because they're the smaller in numbers of different known societies. Another one is the Council of Foreign Relations, which is an American version of the Bilderberger organization. Then you have the Trilateral Commission. But along with these three better-known organizations, you have such groups as Nine Wise Men, you have the Cincinnati Club, then you have the think tanks, the foundations, the NGOs, the universities, and all of them are working together towards the same goal.
Što se 1954. dogodilo i gdje? Što je započelo tradiciju sastanaka grupe Bilderberg? Gdje su se prvi put našli?
Well, you see, the Bilderberg organization was founded by this group of people called Synergy International, who were really a Martinist occult secret society. Now, these Martinists, their roots go back to the 1780s, and they were founded as the counterattack to the achievements of the United States American Revolution. And again, it's a medium of bringing together interests of people who share, their common ideology of the world. And that ideology has nothing to do with, nation building. It is rather destruction, wholesale destruction of every nation-state republic on earth with all of its consequences.
Koliko članova broji Družba Bilderberg danas? Koliko ljudi se okuplja na tim godišnjim sastancima?
Well, since 1954, when they met for the first time in Oosterbeek in a hotel called the Bilderberg Hotel, which at the time was owned by the Dutch royal family, the number hasn't really changed. It was 67 at the beginning, and then it grew because the number of nations who participated in Bilderberg conferences grew. And now 120 to 130 people participate annually. Out of these, 1/3 of the delegates are from the United States, and the rest are from Europe. And smaller nations, such as Denmark, Spain, Italy, Portugal, they get to bring 3 delegates, one a politician, one a business leader, and one a media representative. Larger nations, such as France and Germany and the UK, they get to bring about 6 to 8 different participants. Another thing about Bilderberg is that before, it used to be a NATO alliance, Europe, United States, and Canada. That is until the fall of the Berlin Wall. And now it has also incorporated members from former Warsaw Alliance.
Kakav je profil ljudi koji su članovi Bilderberga, što su oni u svojim zemljama po zanimanju ili po položaju?
Well, again, irrelevant of their position in their countries, what all of them share is an ideology, and that ideology is ideology of, it's an empire. What they're doing is creating an empire. That's what globalization is. That's what, these multi-state unions are. It's just another word for an empire. And the empire these people are creating is an empire of money, an empire of usury, an empire which goes against, the very basis of what classical culture has represented for the past 2,500 years. And again, individually, you have people who represent the left and the right and the center and the extreme left and the extreme right, and you have the labor is also represented within the organization. You have the most important business leaders there, multi-billionaires, key politicians, European commissioners. European royalty sits at this very big table with all these other members. And finally, they're joined by the leading representatives of international mainstream publications, such as New York Times, Washington Post, Le Monde from France, Grupa from Spain. And that's one of the reasons, we really haven't heard much about these powerful people in the mainstream press.
Koliko sam uspio shvatiti, trudite se biti na svakoj tajnoj Bilderberškoj konferenciji, barem izvana s fotoaparatom u ruci. Je li to točno?
Well, it's. I wish it was, and present is stretching it a little bit, in a sense that yes, I always know where these people meet, but unfortunately, I'm never allowed in, and I do mean unfortunately because I would like to find out, firsthand. We do have excellent sources within Bilderberg organization, and not one but several, and which is how we always know what these people are talking about. And if you go back over the last 10 years, my predictions over the past 10 years, some of them 5, 6, 7 years in advance, were remarkably accurate, as so many alternative publications have admitted, such as, for example, in 2002 when the Bilderbergs met in the United States. Not only did they decide on the exact date of the war in Iraq, but they also decided to push the oil price up from $18 a barrel to something like $100 a barrel by the end of 2007. And you know what? It hit 100 on the 2nd of January 2008, so that was a pretty good prediction.
Možete li dati još neke primjere stvari koje su dogovorene na sastancima grupe Bilderberg, a potom su nas, običnu populaciju, zatekli kao iznenađenje koju godinu dana kasnije?
Well, another thing is in 2005, they discussed pushing the oil price from $100 a barrel to 150 by middle of 2008, and it hit 147.5 in July, August 2008. Also in 2005, and then a meeting in Germany, they talked about pushing the gold price from $300 to $1,000, and of course it went up to $1,000 an ounce. In 2006, when they met in Canada, they talked about not so much orchestrating, but the fact that they couldn't prevent the complete and utter meltdown of the housing market in the United States and in many different countries in Europe, and amongst them Spain. And as we saw, this is exactly what happened. And going back to the 1990s, in 1996, the war in Kosovo was discussed, and of course that took place 3 years later. And in 1992, for the first time when they met in Evian in France, they talked about the need for creating the United Nations Army. And 14 years later, aside from the fact that we already have a rapid reaction force in Europe, which is your de facto European army, 14 years later, that is in 2006, when they met in Canada on the outskirts of Ottawa, suddenly the United Nations Army became the key issue, not only for the Canadian politicians, but also in the mainstream Canadian press.
Na koji način grupa Bilderberg provodi svoje odluke prema bazi, znači prema dolje, prema političarima u zemljama koje nemaju svog Bilderberga, da tako kažem, ili u drugim institucijama, naravno nisu svi uključeni u Bilderberge, pa ipak treba obaviti neki posao za njih.
Well, that's a very good question, and unfortunately, not too many people ask me this question. One of the reasons, excuse me, people have a hard time believing in secret societies controlling the world is that there is a Cartesian fantasy world system where they literally believe that one person, a very small group of people, control the world, instead of understanding it as a dynamic social processes against, the historical, especially when you put it in historical context of social-political events over the past 1,000 years. So no, there's no one bad guy who tells everybody else what to do. Yes, it's a socio-historical concept. But what's interesting about these people is that there's no one who's leading the group. You have a president, who is in this case right now Etienne d'Avignon, but he's not the decision maker. But for example, in January you have Davos Economic Forum. In February, March, the Council of Foreign Relations, they have their annual meeting. Then in April, the Trilateral Commission, they have their annual meeting. In May, June, Bilderbergers meet. In September, International Monetary Fund of the World Bank, they have their annual meeting. In October, Trilateral Commission Asia have their regional meeting. In November, Trilateral Commission Europe, they meet. And in December, Trilateral Commission Americas, they have their regional meeting. But there's nobody leading these discussions. But the decisions reached in one get passed on to the other, and before you know it, they become the key points in regional elections, then national elections, then international elections. Then becomes a key issue to be discussed in European Parliament and the United Nations. And before you know it, every mass media publication is saying, now what are we going to do to stop genocide in Yugoslavia? What are we going to do about all these, poor people being killed in Afghanistan? We have to bring democracy to Afghanistan. And that's really how it works. As an example, I just gave you, in 1992, they met and discussed for the first time the issue of the United Nations Army in Evian in France. And then in 1995, taking advantage of the war in ex-Yugoslavia, it became a key issue in national elections in Spain, where suddenly, the mainstream Spanish press, led by El País, which is a Bilderberger publication, was saying that, there was a need to create a force that could fight, the bad Serbs so that they wouldn't kill the good people of, all these other former Yugoslav provinces. And then in 1996, it became again an issue in the European elections. In 1998, just when the war was getting underway, in 1998-99 in Kosovo, again it became a key issue in elections in France, in England, in Holland, in Denmark, and in Sweden. And then in 2001, BBC, which is the main Bilderberger organ in the world, it had a very important article where they're literally talking about the need to create the rapid reaction force and saying just how necessary that is for the stability of Europe. And then, as I said again, in 2006, Bilderbergers met in Ottawa. And 2 days after the meeting ended, it was on the front page of every Canadian publication controlled, which is obviously mainstream publications controlled by Bilderbergers, where it wasn't Bilderberg, but actually United Nations, according to the publications, who came up with the idea of the need to create the United Nations Army. And again, they take their time, but they certainly understand that it's a long process, especially, again, if you put it in historical context and not just look at it as a conspiracy of Cartesian one-person conspiracy.
Može li se reći da je Europska unija projekt Bilderberga?
Well, of course, as a matter of fact, not only can we say it, but they themselves have admitted it, so that's no longer in question. They released Etienne Davignon, the president of the Bilderbergers, talked a few months ago about the fact that, yes, the idea for the European Union was first, second, and mostly discussed at Bilderberg conference, and he was very proud of the fact that Bilderberg organization worked together to create what he believes to be such an important group or pan-European Union for world's peace.
S obzirom na sve što se od vas može čuti od Bilderbergima, teško je zamisliti da su Europsku uniju zamislili kao demokratski raj, kakvim se predstavlja često puta u medijima, kao nešto bolje od onog što zemlje koje još nisu ušle imaju. Što oni zapravo žele postići Europskom unijom? Kakva je njena struktura? Može li se govoriti o nekakvoj vrsti prikrivene diktature ili čak otvorene, kao što neki tvrde?
Well, you just hit right on the right word. Any kind of globalization is an empire, and any kind of an empire is a dictatorship. And theirs is an empire of money. And in the end, their plan hasn't changed at all over the past 1,000 years. What's today called the Bilderberg Group or the Bilderberg Organization or Society, 800 years ago was called the Venetian Black Nobility. And in fact, if you look historically, these are the same families over this very long span of time, and that's why I do mean historically. You can really see how the same families have been working towards the goal of control, and we're seeing it right now. European Union, you have the North American Union being created. African Union is already, ahead of North American Union in their plans. And now you have the Asians gathering together under one roof as well. And again, the plan hasn't changed in all these years or centuries. It is the wholesale destruction of nation-state republics. And that is very important because, you see, nation-states, independent nation-states, have constitutions, flags, currencies, borders, their own monetary systems. And right now, what we have in Europe is we have this pan-European Union where nations are no longer allowed to feed their own citizens. They don't have their own monetary policy. It's controlled by the same people whose idea to destroy every nation state on earth. And obviously, my advice to Croatia is, please, whatever you do, think twice before you decide becoming third-rate citizens in this global dictatorship.
Kada se priča o uništenju nacionalnih država, što je danas stvarnost s obzirom da se želi stvoriti jedna nadnacionalna država iz svega što se vidi, kako se taj koncept uklapa u vrijeme od prije 700, 800 ili 600 godina? Kada još nije ni bilo pravih nacionalnih država. Zbog čega ih je prvo trebalo stvarati da bi ih se potom uništavalo?
Well, what we're doing right now, I'm not sure if you're referring to former Yugoslavia, or you're referring to
ja govorim o jednom srednjovjekovnom svijetu, puno malih kraljevina, bez pravih nacija, kad ljudi čak i nisu svjesni svog nacionalnog identiteta, a države su tek kraljevine i tek će nastati od njih nacionalne države.
You see, the whole concept of nation-state republics was born as a result of a meeting, a council, which was held in 1439, 1440, which was called then the Council of Florence. And this Council of Florence was the temporary merger of the Eastern and Western rites of the Christian Church, and it was led by brilliant people such as future Pope Pio II and to me, the most brilliant person in the history of the last 600 years, Cardinal Nicolas of Cussat. And as a result of that Council of Florence, first nation-state republic was born in Europe and France with Louis XI, and then in England, which followed suit with Henry VII. And what we got with the nation-state republics is we got a constitution, later in the United States, natural law, general welfare. And, you know, the idea of general welfare, a lot of people understand it as a welfare state, you know, some big fat guy sitting at home watching television, eating pizza, collecting unemployment benefits. But, you know, the whole idea of what general welfare represents, it's, you know, it is immortality of the planet, of the humans. What is the responsibility of governments to its citizens? To provide for future generations. And that is what general welfare means, especially as it's written in the preamble to the Constitution of the United States. And that's what these people have been trying to destroy, you know, the idea of welfare where the states, you know, provide as a higher goal and higher objective for its citizens. And that's what immortality is, you know, assuring the survival of the human species. And that's, you know, that's the empire of the soul and of the mind. Of course, the empire of the money, which is what Bilderberg is, they don't need all these people. And another objective reached through nation-state republics is, for the first time in France, because it was an impetus given by the people to the government to continue on the road to scientific developments and progress. And as a result of that, France, back then, began winning square kilometers of space against nature. And that changed, that revolutionized the whole world. We, the people, started growing as people. That's called progress and development. And that has given us wealth. And as Leibniz discovered 200 years ago, progress and development is directly proportional to population density. The more developed we are as nations, the more developed we are as the world, the wealthier we are, the more people live on the planet. And of course, the empire of the money doesn't need all these people. So they need to destroy nation states. They need to destroy, you know, the world economic system, because this is the only way they can drag us back, as you said, you know, to the feudal age where you and I and our children and our children's children worked the land, died, and their children worked the land for a very small group of people who controlled everything else.
Kad bi Bilderberzi htjeli vladati svijetom kroz Svjetsku banku, to ne bi bilo ni pola problema. Međutim, u zadnjih 30 godina pojavili su se dokumenti koji pokazuju da je jedan od strateških ciljeva smanjenje populacije, smanjenje broja ljudi na svijetu. Mnogi autori su spominjali neke dokumente iz 70. godina. U kojim dokumentima je, znači, otkrivena namjera ili nekakva misao da bi trebalo smanjiti broj ljudi na svijetu i kako se to uopće danas radi, ako je to istina?
Well, you know, before modern last 30 years, as you mentioned, you know, Malthus talked about this in his documents. And before that, beginning in the early 1600s, you know, the Venetians, Conti and Sarpi, they talked about it. In fact, you know, Malthus' theory on population is a plagiarized version of, you know, old Venetian black nobility's documents going back 450 years. In modern time, you know, the most famous document which everybody talks about is the 1974 study, population study called Memorandum 200. And in this memorandum, they're talking about reducing the world's population from the year 74 to 1974 to the year 2050 by 3 billion people. And it was the document signed by Kissinger and by Richard Nixon on April 24th, 1974. But again, a lot of normal people, when I say normal, I mean a person who goes to work, wakes up in the morning, goes, you know, works 9 to 5, comes home, you know, watches television, reads an occasional book, and watches a football game. That's a normal person. To explain to this normal person the fact that they want to, you know, reduce population from current level of 6.7 billion to 2 billion people, unless you put it in historical concept against the background of history, you know, people will look at you like you're insane. But again, it makes all the sense in the world because, as I said, you know, previously, Leibniz discovered that population density is proportional to growth. So if we prosper as nations, if we prosper as society, not only are we improving the lifestyles of the people, which is what general welfare is about, our obligation as nations to make sure that we as human race survive, the propagation of the human race, that's what immortality is about. And the empire of the money, they don't want all these people eating up their natural resources. And that's why they need to reduce the world's population, not because it's a whim, but because it's a very historically logical concept, if you look at it from their point of view.
Ljudima je, kao što ste rekli, teško prihvatiti ideju da bi neko htio ubiti 4 milijarde ljudi. Međutim, lako je zamisliti nekoga tko je 37 u Njemačkoj ljudima govorio da će postojati tvornice smrti gdje će ljude kamionima i vlakovima dovoditi pod tuševe, ubiti, spaliti i pustiti kroz dimnjak. To bi naravno svima zvučilo fantastično, no to se dogodilo. Kad već spominjemo to, prije 1954. i prije Bilderberga, kakve su bile veze tih ljudi sa onime što se zbivalo u Europi 30. godina i 40-ih? Danas već ima dosta podataka koji pokazuju da je glavni šef CIA bio pobornik nacizma, da su naciste financirali američki industrijalci, ljubitelji eugenike i slično, čak i neki preci današnjih predsjednika. Kakvu je ulogu ova ista struktura ljudi imala u tom najmračnijem evropskom razdoblju? Jesu li zadovoljni svojim postignućem?
I don't know. I don't think they're satisfied. They're certainly not, unhappy. They're much further ahead than I would like to see them ahead, but not nearly as far, towards reaching their objectives as they want. But, again, if you look at it historically, what's today called Bilderbergers, back in the 1920s, they were the synarchy movement of empires. And the synarchy movement of empires, it was an organization led by Nazis who created banks such as Bank Worms in France, who are the main sponsors of Vichy France and of Hitler. So again, these societies and organizations are very, very old, and their intentions haven't changed. They keep morphing from one form to another, but the final objective is the same. And as far as who some of these individuals are, when we talk about Bilderberg, as I said, it's Bilderberg, and you have Trilateral Commission, and you have Council of Foreign Relations working together. You have different NGOs, you have foundations, think tanks. Well, two of the principal foundations going back historically, who played such an important role in what you were describing back in the 1930s in Nazi Germany, were the Alfred P. Sloan and the Sage Foundation. Alfred Sloan was the CEO of General Motors back in 1923, and of course, an ardent Nazi. And both of these organizations, they created the Liberty League in the United States, who in the 1930s tried to depose Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the man who has done so much, for America, the last great president in the United States history. And ironically enough, again, merging the past and the future and the present into one, the same characters who today are the hardcore nucleus of Barack Obama's administration, you have Larry Summers and Peter Orsgaard and Sus Sunstein, all of these people, they all, come out of the Alfred P. Sloan and Sage Foundation, which is a roundtable kind of organization. And all of these people are what they call themselves behavioral economists, which two words, you have to be, insane or on drugs to actually put behavioral and economists together until you understand that what they're doing today is exactly the same kind of, morphing of evil principles back in the 30s of using economy, using behavior, of people to control economic processes.
Opisali ste kako to danas rade američki predsjednici, no malo prije ste rekli da je Franklin Delano Roosevelt bio zadnji veliki predsjednik. Nije li on zapravo bio dio tog istog plana s obzirom da je bio upleten i u rješenja takozvane velike depresije, još jedne namjerno stvorene krize? Potom je također imao sklonosti prema ulasku Amerike u rat i slično. Pa mi se čini da on dosta bio, kako bi se to reklo starim jezikom, na liniji tog plana. Što ga čini tako posebnim u odnosu na druge predsjednike?
Well, you're absolutely right. The Great Depression wasn't all that great and wasn't really a depression. It was simply a transfer of wealth. And it's something that a lot of people don't understand about how money works. It's not like water where it evaporates and disappears. Money goes from point A to point B. So in the case of Great Depression, somebody lost and somebody gained. When I talk about Roosevelt being a great president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, I mean, not Teddy Roosevelt. I'm not talking about every one of his actions was an action for the betterment of humanity. I also put it in terms of historical concept where certain decisions were made, and I'm not making excuses for him because, as a matter of fact, I have never voted in my entire life, and I would never do it for anybody ever, here or anywhere else. But when you put it in historical concept, once he became president, he did some wonderful things for America, such as again going back to the idea of national banks. And to the physical economy, which actually gave growth to the United States, which has been destroyed right now, not only in the United States, but everywhere else, which is one of the reasons why society is in such a bad state as it is. And of course, Roosevelt was behind all the information with as far as Pearl Harbor is concerned. So again, there's no denying that the man is he's not a saint. Mm-hmm. But again, we have to put all that in political context. You have to navigate some pretty treacherous water. And there are certain things you have to do which you certainly don't agree with, and there are certain other things you could do. And I think he did enough good things to be warranted a great president. Mm-hmm. And another great president, you could also say Kennedy, but he certainly didn't live long enough, to warrant this.
Za njega vjerujem da bi veliki predsjednik, recimo zato jer je ubijen, pa eto, tako bi se recimo postupalo s nekim ko ne pleše u taktu. Kad smo već kod američkih predsjednika, postoji nešto što se zove Loganov zakon. Taj Loganov zakon ima velike veze s američkim sudjelovanjem na sastancima grupe Bilderberg. Objasnite nam kakav je to zakon i tko ga i kako krši.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Your previous comment, Kennedy was a great man. Unfortunately, he wasn't there long enough, And as far as Logan Act is concerned, basically what it says is that it's illegal for American businessmen to meet in private with politicians to discuss public policy. And this is exactly what Bilderbergers, all the Bilderberger businessmen have been doing since 1954, but flaunting a Logan Act, again, putting it in context, it's really not that important because, politicians do illegal things all the time, and I wish it was only, as bad as somebody trying to make a little bit of money on the side. Unfortunately, it's a far, greater evil, but that said, very few people who attend Bilderberg actually understand what's behind their final objectives. In other words, just because someone is invited to a Bilderberg conference doesn't mean that they understand what the final objectives are. These objectives are not revealed to anybody. These are very powerful groups of people who've been meeting for many, many, many years. And again, it's just a medium of bringing all these interests together. But it's a very dynamic system. It changes with the times. It absorbs and new parts while it excretes the remaining of old dead decrepit companies like Arthur Andersen or Enron. Members come and go, but the system, it doesn't change. It's a self-perpetuating system, a virtual spider web of financial, political, military, and industrial interests with a Venetian ultramontane model at the center. But again, out of all these people who attend, most of them only know that they're breaking the law by attending because of the Logan Act. Mm-hmm. They don't understand that there's a objective of destroying the world as we understand the world for a good of a very small group of people. That I think is also in fairness to most of these people.
Je li točno da svoje mandate predsjednici nekih najvećih zemalja svijeta dobivaju upravo na sastancima grupe Bilderberg? I ako da, kako je to bilo s nekim od aktualnih vodećih ljudi u svijetu?
Well, I think the most telling example is Bill Clinton, who attended back in 1991. I should mention that sitting presidents, meaning presidents who are in office, never attend Bilderberg simply because every second of their time is accounted for. But they're represented by others in the government. And the people who attend Bilderberg meetings, they don't attend as individuals. They attend as representatives of a government or some organization. As far as Clinton, he came in 1991, and David Rockefeller took him aside, and he asked him, how he felt about NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, which was signed on October 3rd, 1987 in Washington. And Clinton had, at the time, he was just a lowly governor of Arkansas, and he was making $35,000 a year, which, compared to what David Rockefeller makes a year, makes you wonder what was he doing there.
Možda ima mali fuš u švercanju droge, ali to je druga priča.
Well, he did, but that's not why he attended Bilderberg. It's David Rockefeller said to him, do you know what NAFTA is? And Clinton said, well, no, I have no idea. So Rockefeller sat him down, and he gave him a master class on what North American Free Trade Agreement was. And then he asked him, if you were president, would you support it? And he said, well, is it important to you, David? And Rockefeller said, it's very, very important to me. And Clinton said, well, of course. And so Rockefeller stretched his arm and said, thank you, Mr. President. It's a story. It's a funny story, and it's almost an anecdote. But the fact is that next year, the following year, in 1992, he was elected president. And another example is Barack Obama. He attended in 2008 along with Hillary Clinton. That famous episode where, the reporters were on the airplane and suddenly Barack Obama wasn't there. He just kind of disappeared. And then he appeared at the Bilderberg conference in Chantilly. And at that meeting, the American delegates told Barack Obama, and again, I know this because our members, who are inside Bilderberg have told us this. And for those who are doubting what I'm saying right now, again, if you look on the internet, my predictions going back years and years. My batting average is almost 100%. And so American delegates told Barack Obama that, the presidency was his to lose. In other words, you play by, do what you're supposed to, say the right things, smile the right time, and, you win the presidency. And they also told Hillary Clinton to stay out of his way. Because, the initial plan of Hillary Clinton was to take over the Democratic nomination at the Democratic National Convention. And they basically warned her not to even think about it. And so when, after the Democratic National Convention, so many Hillary Clinton supporters were so disappointed because they absolutely were sure that she was going to try to, take it away from him. But she couldn't because there was just, the Bilderbergers have too much dirt on Hillary Clinton.
Koji su europski predsjednici dobili svoje poslove na sastancima grupe Bilderberg?
Well, it's not such a clear-cut case as in the case of Bill Clinton or Barack Obama. Tony Blair attended, and then several years later he became Prime Minister of England, and Jose Socrates from Portugal attended, and then a year and a half later became, the leader of Portugal. But
Angela Merkel.
That's true. The case with Merkel is different in a sense that, as a matter of fact, I was it was published in Nexus magazine, and I was the only person in the world. There's that famous photograph of Chancellor Gerhard Schroeder entering the Bilderberg conference in Rotterdam in Germany in 2005, which I took from about a kilometer away with a very long lens, and he's shaking hands with Jürgen Tremp, the CEO of Daimler Chrysler. And then there's another photograph where Merkel is coming in as well. But in the case of Merkel, it was just simply a decision where they felt that it's not that she made a great impression or anything like that. They just felt that Schroeder was all used up, and they just needed a change. And they all decided to get their people to promote Merkel. And they at the meeting they were talking about how to get her very boring, because she's boring. She's like a rag, and trying to get this rag to actually look, appetizing. And but she didn't earn it. In the case of Clinton earned it. Barack Obama did his thing, and I think the best case of somebody earning it and not getting it, but it's not because of Bilderberg, because it just they just couldn't do it, is a case of John Edwards, who was the vice presidential candidate on the Democratic ticket with John Kerry. In 2004, he attended the Bilderberg conference in Stresa in Italy, and he gave an absolutely brilliant talk on the state of the labor unions in the United States. And Bilderbergers, they were so impressed with his eloquence that breaking, protocol, which is a very important thing to Bilderberg, they all got up and they all, clapped, in recognition of his great speech. And then Henry Kissinger literally, walked out of the room, picked up the telephone, his cell phone, and called John Kerry, and he said, "John, I think we found your vice presidential candidate." And again, you may not believe a story. It may sound like a tall story. But the fact is that when my photographs of John Edwards appeared in the alternative press in the United States, New York Times immediately published an article on page 12 of their edition recognizing and admitting that, might John Edwards, being selected, chosen because of, a great performance. And, of course, they made it look like, he was a great leader. But in fact, they just had to diffuse the situation and because of, my coverage of their conference.
Spomenuli ste da se u toj vrlo dinamičnoj grupi sve mijenja, osim plana, ljudi se mijenjaju taktike, čak ponekad strategije. Međutim, još nešto se ne mijenja. Često puta, dugi niz desetljeća, dakle, tu se pojavljuju ista imena, konkretno mislim na Rockefellere i Rothschilde. Jesu li ta imena doista toliko važna i bitna u kontekstu plana za dominacijom i vlašću nad svijetom i same grupe Bilderberg?
They are important to a certain level. They're a lot less important than most people realize. The fact that, people know their names makes them a lot less important than we think. Because, I think it's not very logical to think that normal people who have a normal job in a factory or as a teacher would know the names of the most powerful people in the world. And considering the fact that the Rockefeller wealth, it only goes back 150 years, and the Rothschilds' wealth goes back 250 years, which in historical terms is not very much, considering also that their wealth is measured in $50 billion, $100 billion, no more, because according to Forbes magazine, the guy who has the most money in the world is Warren Buffett or Bill Gates. In fact, the really powerful families, the really wealthy families historically, I'm talking about 1,000-year wealth, their wealth is measured in trillions and quadrillions of dollars. Now, when I say quadrillions, I'm not just throwing a very large number with lots of zeros at you to impress you. In fact, I have a document which we will publish in my new book, The Shadow Masters. And it's an extract of a bank account from Baron Krupp, K-R-U-P-P. These are, 19th century German industrialists and arms merchants. Well, this one bank extract has $112 trillion. Considering that you and I have more than one bank account, we may only have $10 in the bank account, but we have more than one. I would think that, the Krupps would also have more than one. And if one account has $112 trillion, you can only imagine how much money these people have. And as far as the names are concerned, I discovered after spending 2.5 years researching in the National Library in Florence, which is one of the most important centers in the world for old research, that the two of the more, not the most, but two of the more powerful families in the world are, one of the Savoys. Most people may know the name because of the Hotel Savoy. But another name, and this is a name that I think very few people who are not initiated would know, is the Frescobaldi. And their wealth is measured in hundreds of quadrillions of dollars. And when I say it again, I don't just throw a number at you.
Pretpostavljam da ni engleska kraljevska obitelj nije među najsiromašnijima.
Well, in fact, the Queen of England is out of the better-known people to the general population. She is far wealthier than the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds. And although periodically we hear that the Queen has $3 billion, in fact, that I think she probably has $3 billion, in her purse.
In coins.
in coins, exactly. Because again, the Queen of England, Elizabeth II, her roots are German, but her roots are also Venetian because, as I have discovered, she goes back to the very, very powerful Venetian black nobility family of Marquess de Este de Venezia. And these are the nobles, whose roots go back again about 800 years. So you can say that, she is certainly today the most powerful woman person in the world, and certainly the wealthiest out of the known individuals.
To je dugo vremena za štednju. Sve ove detalje i puno više njih, naravno, pišete u svojoj knjizi Istinita priča o družbi Bilderberg. Spomenuli ste malo prije sklonost protokolima i važnost protokola kod Bilderberga. Imaju li ta tajna društva poput Bilderberga svoju okultnu stranu? Znači, neku koja je sklona ritualima, mističnom pogledu na svijet i slično?
Well, as I said, the most important of these organizations within Bilderberg and their roots is a Martinist occult secret society, which is going back to the 1780s. That's probably the most important occult society. I don't know what their rituals are, but again, we can trace Bilderberg back to the Martinist cult. We can trace it back to the Venetian black nobility about 800 years ago. But we can also trace it back all the way, to the oracles of Delphi. It's the same people. This fight really hasn't changed in the last 2,500 years.
Možemo li ići do Egipta, Sumera?
Well, absolutely. That's exactly where that's where I was going, all the way back, to the ancient Egypt, because their rituals are the same. Their ideals are the same. Their vision of things is the same. And you could take any one of the organizations you want within Bilderberg, and they all function on the same ancient principles. And it's a very old fight spanning 2,500 years at least, going back to the Plato and Socrates on the one hand, and Aristotle on the other, and going all the way to the present. So it's a very old fight, and I think I think they've been going at it for such a long time, and unfortunately they're so close, to reaching their goals. But we're not exactly without resources, we the people.
Evo za kraj, neću vas pitati gdje se odvijalo nekoliko zadnjih sastanaka grupe Bilderberg, što sigurno znate, niti gdje će se nekoliko budućih odvijati, što možda znate, možda ne, nego bi pitanje bilo ono što ste na početku i rekli. Koji bi bio u konačnici krajnji cilj grupe Bilderberg? Postoji li trenutak u kojem bi oni bili zadovoljni i rekli, evo, postigli smo svoj cilj, sad možemo konačno se nakon 4000 godina opustiti, uživati, popiti piće bez straha da će nas mase svrgnuti ili nešto. Čini mi se ta sklonost prema moći pomalo iracionalna, pa me zanima, postoji li tu uopće zaista krajnji cilj kada će sve biti gotovo?
Well, it's absolutely rational if you're a normal human being. If you're degenerate, as they are degenerates, we cannot understand why somebody would want to control the sun, the air, the wind, the water. We can't understand that. But this is exactly what these people want. They want to be gods on earth. And to us, that's degeneracy. But in order for them to be gods on earth, they must destroy us. But what they don't understand, is the planet's progress and greatness and immortality is measured by the minds of the people. And that's something that they're trying to destroy, and that's one of the only ways that we can lose this is if they can destroy our minds of the people, because again, this degeneracy of their ultimate goal of total control passes, through people who will allow them to do it. And before the show, we're talking about Croatia, and I was very disturbed to hear what you had to say about them lowering the percentage of votes that would require to enter the European community. And my advice to Croatia, and I hope country listens. don't join European communities, stay free, independent nation with your own monetary system, you know, where a country could feed its own citizens and decide its own future. Being in Europe only leads to destruction, as I can tell you from experiences in France, in Spain, in Portugal. Greece is about to default and become, you know, fourth world status nation. Is that what Croatia wants as well?
Hvala vam na gostovanju i do neke sljedeće prilike. Želim vam puno uspjeha i u vašem filmu za koji se radi po knjizi i s vašom knjigom Istinita priča o družbi Bilderberg i novim knjigama i do neke sljedeće prilike.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Hvala i vama na pažnji. Postoji stara izreka da se kočijaši mijenjaju, a konji ostaju isti. S obzirom na sve, čini se da izreka nije potpuno točna. Čini se zapravo da su i kočijaši uvijek isti. U tom slučaju nema zapravo druge nego da konji nešto promijene. Doviđenja.